Still with us is Pete Hegseth and the former Homeland Security Secretary, Jeh Johnson. Mr. Secretary, great to see you both. You said get your reflections on what we just witnessed. Mr. Secretary, for you, you've been to a lot of these firsthand, right?
Yes.
Your thoughts?
Two thoughts. One, I will predict that at the 100th anniversary of this, there will still be veterans alive to experience that, given advances in health care and so forth. Somebody is going to be there, I guarantee it. They'll be 120 years old.
There's Tom Hanks right there.
The other thought I had, when I've been to Normandy, I've gone to the cemeteries in North Africa, the thing that occurs to me when you look at the maps with the flow charts of all these different military units converging on one point from all these different nations, you wonder, could we as a nation today, we're so divided, could we as a nation today come together for such a common purpose with such determination? I worry about that. I worry whether we'd be able to do that today. What happened 80 years ago today is such a tribute to the character of our nation.
What do you think it's going to take for us to come together for a moment like this?
I used to say a crisis. We had a crisis with COVID, and we were divided then. I'm these days in my post-government life working with the American Bar Association on how we strengthen and restore our democracy. And I think a lot of it goes back to basic civics education, what this country is all about, what citizenship means, the responsibilities of being a good citizen. The greatest generation understood that. I hope today's 20-year-olds understand that.
Why don't you take the same question, Pete?
Yes and amen. That's exactly right. I mean, I was struck by what a young sailor said. She said, the watch stands relieved. And I didn't know what a watch was. I'm not a Navy guy. I didn't know that. But basically saying, hey, World War II generation, you did your part. Your watch is relieved. Now it's on us.
That's right.
And that is the question. Are we passing that ethos off to the next generation, that appreciation, that chill, the chill that goes up your spine when you hear taps? Or when you hear that 21-gun salute. You know, that was 3 guns. Usually, I'm used to hearing seven rifles. That was 3 guns at 7 shots each. I've stood in the gravel on a remote fob in Iraq hearing a 21-gun salute for a brother of mine. Like, when you hear that, it jars you. You don't have to have experienced that to understand the significance of that. Sure. And may we pass it to the next generation to understand the significance of taps of that 21-gun salute. Take your kids to any cemetery. It doesn't have to be in Normandy. It can be in every town has one. Yep. And every metropolitan area has what to a child looks like forever of crosses and grave markers to give them a sense of what has been paid for them. Sure. We can all do that.
Mr. Secretary, in addition to the Department of Homeland Security, you were also the General Counsel at the Air Force. There's Tom Hanks right there. And at the Department of Defense. And you've worked with all these people, you know, and Lloyd Austin, I know you work with him. But also this is, you know, what happened back then, 80 years ago, is personal. You have 2 uncles who were Tuskegee Airmen.
I have 2 uncles who were Tuskegee Airmen. I have another uncle who was a member of the Navy's famed Golden 13, the first black officers in the United States Navy. I have a grandfather who fought in World War I, saw combat. I have ancestors who fought in the American Civil War and the American Revolutionary War. And my son, I don't want to embarrass him, he wears the uniform of our nation as well.
A life of service.
It's beautiful.
Life of service, I'd like to think so.
So, gentlemen, we were watching that video, and some quotes I wrote down that really struck us. They were talking about the boats, and when the hatch was open, they called it the Higgins boat. They had two visions: help each other and don't get killed. And one said, "My mother's prayers that she said saved me that day," and another one said, "They were willing to stand up, and not all of them came back." What was the most powerful thing when you're watching this? What stands out to you?
The veterans who were all hovering around 100 years old, who were able to stand for the commander-in-chief, accept the challenge coin, who made it all the way to France. I mean, how many 100-year-olds do you know that travel such a distance to be at something like this? That to me is the most moving. And, you know, 80 years ago, they were everyday Americans from various parts of our country who were ordered in to combat. They didn't choose that.
How about you, Pete?
Well, talk about something that never changes. You know, stick with each other, stay together, and don't get killed. It's, the modern fighting man is saying the exact same thing with their brothers in arms. I mean, when we rolled out, in whatever formation we rolled out in, that was the mindset. It doesn't change, and may we have a military and a nation befitting the sacrifice of men that we just saw right there. And they did it with far less intelligence, far less preparation, far less training, and a fortified enemy in a way we can barely imagine today. Right. And they did it with courage because they loved the nation they were fighting
So,
for.
Pete, how do we take moments like this? Because I think so often we have these celebrations, whether it is obviously the 80th anniversary, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and we use this as a rallying call for that day. But how do we take this memory, this celebration, and move it forward toward recruitment and getting our young men ready for the next battle and the patriotism
Your
message?
book's about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's on families. That's on parents.
Yes.
That's on communities.
Yep.
That's why I'm a big believer in civic ritual. I'm a big believer in parades and ceremonies. You know, we made our kids sit out in the blazing sun of a Memorial Day ceremony. There weren't many kids there.
Right.
And it wasn't interesting necessarily for kids. But if just one word or one part of that ceremony strikes them, it's meaningful. And I think our schools and our communities, our churches need to do more to reflect that, to push that. And of course, just generally in our schools, you mentioned it in civics. If our kids aren't taught the exceptional things that these men and other men and women have done, then they won't want to stand up for this nation. We're being taught that it's somehow we're a bad nation. I mean, you can't keep a country when you're teaching your kids that that country is evil when it's not.
You know, one of the many responsibilities I had at DHS was to naturalize new citizens. And it was always very moving to naturalize somebody who was already wearing the uniform of this nation, who signed up for the U.S. military as a lawful permanent resident, who was then becoming a citizen of our country after having put on the uniform of our country. What an example.
As a platoon leader, I was in charge with my company of helping guys who were wearing our uniform become citizens as well. Right. And there was nothing cooler than that opportunity.
That's amazing.
That is great.
But do you worry about our school system not teaching we're an exceptional nation?
I do worry about that, yes. I got that education in social studies.
I got it.
50 years ago when I was a senior in high school. The basics, I remember when our local congressman came to our high school, and I thought that was such a huge deal. I do worry about whether or not the 17 and 18-year-olds today are getting even the same basic civics education that someone on the path to naturalization gets and remembers it. How many Americans can name all three branches of our government? How many Americans know how many members of the U.S. Supreme Court there are, or how many U.S. senators there are per state? You'd be surprised at the number who do not.
It's a sad commentary. Mr. Secretary, we thank you very much for joining us for the live coverage. Pete, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Check out his book. It's #1 bestseller right now, War on the Warriors. Available everywhere.